Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about Andy Beshear in the 2026 Kentucky Senate race, where an article came out a few days ago by a top Democratic donor in the state of Kentucky that said they wanted to see Andy Beshear run for the U.S. Senate race. Now, an article has come out, I believe by a top advisor of Beshear, saying that he will not be running for Senate in 2026. But I want to talk about this because this is such an interesting conversation and one that I've been seeing a lot of talk about, both online, but even in my own comment section as well. I remember responding to a few comments about Andy Beshear and a possible run for Senate. Now, to be clear, Andy Beshear has made it known that he will not be running for U.S. Senate. Beshear's top political strategist, Eric Hires, says that Beshear's stance has not changed, which is that Governor Beshear promised to serve his full second term as governor and intends to do so. For him, it's not about a future choice, but his love for and his commitment to his current job. Andy loves Kentucky, and his job as governor lets him fight for the Commonwealth every day, Hires said in a statement to the Herald Leader. This comes as one of Kentucky's most prominent political donors and philanthropist, Christy Brown, of the Brown-Forman Spirits dynasty in Louisville, wrote a guest column in the Courier-Journal and spoke out strongly in favor of Beshear running for the Senate in 2026 to succeed Mitch McConnell. Okay, so that's the background of this news. Now, first things first, let's talk about this. And this is where I start to begin giving my own opinion and speculating here. Why does Andy Beshear not want to run? Him and his political team gave his reason, which is that he wants to continue being governor of Kentucky and he wants to serve out the rest of his term. That is the answer they're saying. The answer that I think is going on behind the scenes is one that's pretty obvious when a governor says that they don't want to run for Senate, and that's because Andy Beshear wants to run for president in 2028. Now, with respect to Andy Beshear, if he were to become the Democratic nominee, he would be one of the best general election candidates that there is. But thus far, he does not really have much of a chance at becoming the Democratic nominee in 2028. And yes, he has at times, I do believe, essentially ruled out running for president in 2028. But how many times do candidates end up running for president and say, no, I'm not running for president, I'm not thinking about that right now, and ultimately they change their mind and end up running for president? Now, Beshear could be being completely honest and saying he just wants to finish out his term as governor and not run for Senate and maybe even not run for president in 2028. But at least Beshear, if he runs for Senate, potentially him losing a Senate race could hurt the image that he has built up for himself, which is a Democrat being elected twice now in a very Republican state. That hurts him and his image if he were to run for Senate and lose. Now, let's go down the path where maybe Beshear is telling the truth, where he just wants to serve out his term and he doesn't want to run for Senate or anything until his term is over. And let's say he's also telling the truth, where he decides not to run for president in 2028. Well, there is one pretty important position that Beshear is leaving himself open to, which could be vice president. Because right now the early polling leaders in 2028 for the Democrats are former VP Kamala Harris, Governor of California Gavin Newsom, and Pete Buttigieg from, obviously, President Biden's administration. All three of them would be considered, at very least, from more Democratic areas, aside from Pete Buttigieg, who's from Indiana. But Newsom and Harris, the two leaders thus far, certainly from coastal elite backgrounds. They would probably have a pretty difficult time winning over a lot of rural and blue-collar voters. Now, someone that could help them with that could be the very popular governor of the state of Kentucky, someone that has done that in 2 consecutive elections now. And look, I'm not trying to really stop or belittle or anything of what Governor Beshear has done in Kentucky. He won his re-election in 2023 in the governor's race against Daniel Cameron by 5.1%, a very impressive showing for a Democrat in the state of Kentucky. He also, back in 2019, defeated the Republican governor Matt Bevin by 0.36% in a very close competitive race. Beshear is certainly the top Democrat in the state of Kentucky, and if he were to run for the Senate race in 2026, would give the Democrats a rare opportunity at even being competitive in the Kentucky Senate race. When you look at the recent elections in the state, they have not been close. 2022, Rand Paul won by 23.6%. 2020, Mitch McConnell, his approval ratings, his age and why he's not running again, his approval ratings are very poor. He still won against Amy McGrath by 19.5% in 2020. 2016, Rand Paul won by 14.5. Mitch McConnell in 2014 won by 15.5%. Kentucky at the Senate level has been a reliably red state. At the presidential level, it just voted for Donald Trump by 30.5% in 2024, and in 2020, where Joe Biden improved from 2016 over pretty much everywhere Hillary Clinton did, Trump still won the state by 26 points. So Andy Beshear likely knows a Senate run, despite what many top Democrats are hoping and wanting. Beshear likely knows in a Senate race in Kentucky, he would still probably end up losing, even if it would be a very tough race. And this is where the argument gets made from Democrats. Well, Andy Beshear is very popular in Kentucky. Why do you think he's going to lose? 2 words for you. Larry Hogan. Larry Hogan, popular former governor of the state of Maryland, left office with very high approval ratings in the state despite being a liberal Republican in a Democratic state of Maryland. Maryland's probably just as Democratic as Kentucky is Republican. Larry Hogan runs for Senate in 2024 in an open race against Democrat Angela Also Brooks. Larry Hogan does much better than President Trump does in the state of Maryland, 100%. And that is certainly to be commended to Larry Hogan for that. Angela Also Brooks still ends up winning by around 12% over Larry Hogan. Now again, President Trump lost the state by 28.5. So that is about a 16-point improvement from going from 28.5 down to 11.8 for Larry Hogan. That is a massive improvement and definitely something Larry Hogan should be proud of. But again, a state is so overwhelmingly Democratic, Hogan really had no chance of winning. Montana in 2020, Steve Bullock, former Democrat governor of the state, popular approval ratings, again, running in the state that is overwhelmingly Republican. Not as much as Kentucky or Maryland is, but still very Republican. Steve Daines ends up defeating Bullock by 10 points. One more for you. 2018, Phil Bredesen in Tennessee. Very similar to Maryland and Kentucky in terms of being red. Phil Bredesen, former governor, popular governor, once again, left office, high approval ratings. Marshall Blackburn wins by 11 points. Now, we have seen this work where our governor has been an incumbent senator or an open race. In 2018, Rick Scott did it in Florida. Florida at the time was also one of the closest swing states in the United States. Rick Scott's approval ratings were decently popular, right around 50-50 when he entered the race. It was also, again though, a swing state. He was not running in a state that was plus 30 points for the opposite party, like Andy Beshear would have to do in Kentucky. So if Andy Beshear were to run for the Senate seat in Kentucky, you absolutely bet Andy Beshear would do much better than Trump winning the state by 30.5% in 2024, or do much better than 2020, where Mitch McConnell won the state by 19.5%. Beshear certainly would do that. Would he get it under 10 points? Yeah, I think he would. Could he get it within 5 points? That I'm less sure of, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. But the state is so far to the right, it's not really possible for Beshear to win that race. So Beshear likely sees the writing on the wall here and says, I have a much better chance if I want to run for a future office for president or vice president by not running for this race, not having any tarnish on my political legacy, and not having to worry about losing a Senate race, even if it is more competitive. Now, in terms of doing the Democratic Party is solid, Andy Beshear running for Senate in Kentucky would be a very great move for the National Democrats, and I'll explain why. The Senate map right now for 2026, I have Republicans favored in 51 seats, Democrats in 45. Republicans already have a narrow majority and are probably going to hold the majority in the U.S. Senate, but let's say the Democrats right now are able to get Andy Beshear into the Kentucky Senate race. I don't personally think there's a scenario where Andy Beshear will win. Again, you can fight me on that all day long. The fact is Andy Beshear would not be able to win for the reasons I laid out. But what if Andy Beshear gets the race under 15 points and around 10 points? What if he even finds a way to get it under 5 points? If Kentucky at all is even remotely competitive to the point where the Republicans are fearing the Republican candidate could lose, like Daniel Cameron, who Beshear did beat back in 2023, the Republicans would have to throw in national money and national resources and campaign volunteers and campaign workers from the RNC into Kentucky to defend the seat. They cannot lose a Republican Senate seat in the state of Kentucky. That does not happen in a vacuum. Despite all the political money that is spent on elections, money is not an infinite resource in elections. It is a finite resource. So if Republicans are spending money in Kentucky, that could be taking away money and resources they could be spending in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Michigan, in Maine. So Andy Beshear, though I don't think he has any chance at winning a Senate seat in Kentucky, and seeing as he's not going to run for Senate, I think he probably agrees with that fact. Him running would actually be doing the National Democratic Party a very big solid. That's why I think you also see Sherrod Brown running for Senate in Ohio. Sherrod Brown could conceivably win this race, but I think the odds are stacked against him that most of the time he's probably not going to win. Mary Peltola in Alaska, very similar. I don't think she's going to win that Senate race if she enters, but it gives the Democrats a much stronger chance. And even potentially in Texas with James Tallarico and Colin Allred running for Senate there. Dan Osborne running in Nebraska. All the Democrats running in Iowa. These are all states that I think after Election Day 2026, I think the Republicans are going to win all of them. But I think the Republicans are going to win them by less margins of victory than they have in the past 2 or 4 years or so in the previous election cycles. So what does that mean? Well, if the Republicans are facing closer races in these states, they're going to have to throw money and resources into them, which is going to potentially hurt them in the swing battleground states like Maine, like Michigan, like North Carolina, like Georgia, like New Hampshire, where the Democrats are being on the offensive and not on the defensive. So Andy Beshear is not going to run for Senate in Kentucky in 2026, but if he did, it would be helping the Democrats out, even if he didn't win. It'd be helping the Democrats out potentially in a lot of other places. But again, that's all I have for you on this topic. It's going to be talked about a lot, I'm sure. Andy Beshear not running for Senate in 2026 in Kentucky. He's not going to. It will be a safe Republican win. But if he were to run, it would be something that would help the Democrats, though I don't think Beshear would ultimately win. But if you disagree, feel free to leave all your comments and stuff down in the comment section below. Can't wait to check all that out. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and hope to see you in a future video.